All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining today's session. And I'm going to put in the chat one more time for those just joining the link to my slides. Also, you can access those from the QR code. If others continue to join us, if somebody wants to copy and paste that into the chat again, I'd appreciate it. All right, so hopefully you are here to hear about research-focused generative AI tools. And I'm not sure if the chat will be included in the recordings or not, Dina. Moderator Missy, if you wouldn't mind responding to that, that would be very helpful if you know the answer. All right. So for this brief presentation today, I'll be touching briefly on the types of generative AI. I'll talk a little bit about some of the research AI tools that I'm familiar with, some of the challenges with generative AI, and then consider how does generative AI affect instruction and library services. And I'm a bit biased, I should mention, towards instruction. That's my focus area and how generative AI affects that. So I'm sure there are other considerations as well that should be thought about. All right, so types of generative AI. There are a lot of different types of generative AI out there, from chatbots like ChatGPT to image generation and synthesis tools like Midjourney or Night Cafe. I will be focusing on number 3, the research tools of Consensus, Elicit, and Research Rabbit. There are also music and video generation tools and more. So this is a growing area, and I'm sure others are being created as we speak. So in terms of research generative AI tools, as I mentioned, the 3 I'll be focusing on for today's presentation are Consensus, Elicit, and Research Rabbit. And I see somebody introduce themselves in the chat. Welcome. Feel free to share your name and where you're located, maybe what your library is. I'd love to see where you're located if you're willing to share. I'm in Sioux City, Iowa, from Briar University. I should have mentioned that. All right, so Consensus. This is the first research generative AI tool that I want to talk about briefly. According to their website, Consensus is a search engine that uses language models to surface papers and synthesize insights from academic research papers. Consensus is not a chatbot, but we use the same technology throughout the product to help make the research process more efficient. So that's the goal. They help make research more efficient. So we'll see if we agree with that or not. And the source material for Consensus comes from the Semantic Scholar database. And I've included some links on this slide as well, which you should be able to access if you want to dig a little deeper. So their mission is to use AI to make expert information accessible to all. All right, so here's an example. It's a screenshot of a Consensus prompt that I gave Consensus of how do faculty and instructional designers use universal design for learning in higher education. And it gave me a summary at the top of the page. The top 8 papers were analyzed, and then it gives me the 8 papers that it was talking about below that. So for example, this top paper is from Tech Trends by McDonald et al., and it's been cited 8 times already from 2018. So this is just an example of one of the responses from Consensus. And it does have buttons here, similar to some of our databases. You can save it, cite it, or share it out. So if you click that cite button, it will pop this up, and similar to our database's cite button, it has some minor errors in the citation, but it's a good starting point for creating their citation. So it acts very similarly to some of our databases in terms of its functionality. And I do see a question in the chat about all domains of science, not scholarship from humanities or social sciences. My understanding of it is that Semantic Scholar does have broader content available, including at least abstracts and citations of different articles, and I think that's what they're using. So I think it does cover a wider subject area. All right, so this is another part. So if you actually click on one of the articles, it brings up the article information. and gives you a study snapshot and outcomes if available. And I did want to mention that they have this study snapshot and you can upgrade to premium. So of course, just like most of these generative AI tools, there's a premium version in addition to the free version. And so they do have a limit to what you can do with the free version. Now, in this case, it says I have AI credits left, 20. And that renews, well, I took the screenshot a while ago. So it's a monthly AI credit limit of 20. And of course, I don't know what that means necessarily. I try not to use it, but it can help you get some of these premier or premium things like the study snapshot. And here's another view of an article. Again, some of the similar things. I can generate a snapshot if I use one of my things for the month. And then again, it does give a key takeaway here and then the abstract of the article. So moving on to Elicit. Elicit is a research assistant using language models like GPT-3 to automate parts of the researcher's workflows. So it's, again, kind of similar to Consensus in terms of trying to help the research process become more efficient. Currently, the main workflow in Elicit is literature review. If you ask a question, Elicit will show relevant papers and summaries of key information about those papers in an easy-to-use table. So I asked it the prompt, how should generative AI be used in libraries and higher education? And this is what it gave me. Kind of similar to Consensus, it gave me a summary of the top 4 papers. What I like about this tool is it gives you in-text citations, which is pretty neat. And it gives you a summary and then it cites what papers that they are getting this information from, which I find to be useful. And I'm sure probably most of us librarians do. So this is a list of some of the Elicit sources. It gives you the paper information, the citations, the abstract summaries, and then the main findings. And the thing that's interesting about this tool is that it gives you other options to add additional columns here, which is kind of interesting. And I see a question in the chat about, does top mean most cited, or is there another measurement? That's a good question. And I'm not 100% sure about what process they use to choose what are the top articles there when answering. So that's a very good question. And some of the generative AI tools are not very transparent about how it's making these decisions. And if somebody else is more knowledgeable and knows that answer, please feel free to respond in the chat. It could be most cited, but my understanding is it's probably trying to pull the most relevant articles. So it probably looks in the abstract and the titles to determine keywords and if they're useful or not for the research prompt. So that's my understanding.
And there was another question from Sophia. What databases does Elicit pull from?
Okay. Yes, my understanding is it's Semantic Scholar, as Jenna said there. But good questions. All right, so let me keep moving since I know there's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. And then this is, if you click on one of the articles, what an actual detailed response looks like. It has the abstract summary along with the actual abstract. It also has main findings listed and the article information. So moving on to Research Rabbit. This is my personal favorite because it would have been really useful when I was working on my dissertation literature review. So it's a really interesting tool. If you're not familiar with it, I recommend trying it out and playing with it. So similar to the other tools I'm talking about today, Research Rabbit is a research platform that enables you to discover and visualize relevant literature and scholars, create alerts for awesome newly published papers, share collections with colleagues in the world, and so much more. So that's according to Research Rabbit. Their mission is to empower researchers with powerful technologies. And again, I've included a link there on the slide if you want to check out more about Research Rabbit's mission or information. So this is what Research Rabbit looks like. This is a screenshot of another search I did. And so with Research Rabbit, you can choose one article and then find similar articles, or you can find articles that article cited or articles that cite that article. So you can explode it and click on more and more to essentially you fall down a research rabbit hole with this tool. And so you can click on the right-hand column there. I don't know if you can move the chat box yourself or anything, but you can see the similar work, earlier work, or later work. So those are the options for exploring the papers related to a paper. And then you can also explore the people. You can explore these authors or suggested authors. And then you can also explore linked content. And you can also export papers. So this is a really interesting tool. It also gives you a nice cloud there and a visual representation of all of these different articles that are interrelated with each other. Let's see, I think there's a
Brianne,
question.
yep. How do
Sure.
these platforms compare to using Semantic Scholar directly?
That's a good question. And I haven't actually used Semantic Scholar all that much myself. It looks like Sarah responded saying, I believe Consensus and Elicit give more concise results, and Consensus only gives you 10 articles at a time for a given question. So yes, I'd agree with that, Sarah, that they can give you more concise and supposedly more specialized and relevant results quickly. Does this return similar results like citations databases? My guess would be yes, Cheryl. I am guessing that it would give you similar results to the citation databases. That's a good question. All right. So let me go to the next screen. So why should we use generative AI in the library? Well, as you can imagine, this technology is not going to go away. New generative AI is currently being created, and this will become a mainstay in our culture moving forward. So we need to consider the ways that libraries and librarians will respond to generative AI. Are we going to support patrons in trying to use these new technology tools, or are we going to try to prevent them from using these tech tools and police them? So it's a balancing act. There are issues and challenges with generative AI, which I'll touch on briefly in a little bit, but we do need to think about how we're going to respond to these. All right. I've never used Litmaps, Jonathan Carlson, so I can't tell you about the differences between those tools. So I'll have to explore Litmaps later. So generative AI can be used to advance effectiveness and efficiency, as these tools are stating. They are saying that they can make research more effective and efficient. So you'll have to explore these tools yourself and see if you agree with that. So it does behoove us, in my opinion, to teach our students how to use and evaluate these tools, since they'll likely need to use them in their future workplaces. So some of the ways I've used generative AI are to help make some paragraphs more concise, rephrasing assistance for tricky paraphrasing, creating titles for presentations or programs, organizing dissertation articles, and brainstorming. So I did want to touch base on some of the generative AI challenges, since there are a number of them, and it's important to consider these. As with other educational technology tools, what is free today may not be free tomorrow. Free versions are limited and may eventually disappear. These generative AI tools are creating new things that you can use, but be careful. We don't know where they are getting inspiration from and may be very similar to copyrighted material. For the chatbots, it's important to evaluate information from them to determine the accuracy and avoid believing hallucinations. And that's, I think, a big challenge for our students, and trying to help them become more information literate. Some of the other challenges to consider are privacy and lack of transparency from where these tools are getting their information or what information was put into them to begin with for the training. Quality and hallucinations, such as ghost sources and inaccurate information. Biases and blind spots, that's another big one. The date range of content. plagiarism and academic integrity. I know at least at Briar we've been definitely having some more academic integrity violations come up by students utilizing these tools to answer assignments and just submit things that ChatGPT gave them. And then detection tools and false positives. While we are finding more tools that can detect this type of plagiarism, depending on your institutional definition of plagiarism and academic integrity, sometimes they do have false positives. So that's another thing to think of. And it looks like people are starting to use the term fabrications instead of hallucinations. Interesting. Okay. So I did want to do a shout out to Hervo and Wheatley's article on the AI robot test. If you're not familiar with this could be used to help in our information literacy instruction sessions with students or patrons. And so McGill Library created the AI robot test. This stands for reliability, objective, bias, ownership, and type. So I recommend checking out their article. If you've not heard of the AI robot test, I think it's beneficial for us to start thinking about how to evaluate these tools and how to help our students and patrons evaluate them as well. All right, so I did want to share some links here to information. There's a lot of articles, videos, podcasts, etc., about generative AI. I have collected some of them into a LibGuide. I will admit this is a very preliminary LibGuide. I haven't updated it in a little while, but it links out to a lot of great resources. So please give me a little leeway with that. And then I do link to Consensus, Elicit, and Research Rabbit here as well. So I want to take a moment and see if you want to participate in a poll related to generative AI. And if they're time permitting, I'll share some of the results with you. So let me see if I can type that link in the chat. One person said the link didn't work from the slide. That's interesting. Did you try the QR code or the link itself? Because, okay, it worked for somebody else. Good. So I put the link in the chat as well, so you should be able to access the poll if you choose to participate. You don't have to, this is very optional, but I figured it might be fun to get some audience participation here if you're willing. All right, so since I've posted that to the chat as well, I'm going to go to the next slide. Feel free to fill out the survey if you want to. I don't want to rush you, but I also want to move forward so we can share some of the results and maybe look at some live prompts in some of the tools that we went over. So I did do this poll earlier in a presentation for the ACRL University Library section in a webinar I gave that was a little broader in nature about generative AI. And I asked in this little survey, should librarians embrace generative AI, avoid it, or respond somewhere in between? And most people said embrace it or somewhere in between. Only one person said we should avoid it. So I found that to be interesting. Yeah, I don't have time to delve into the difference between generative AI and other types of AI at this point, but Jennifer put in a nice brief answer there as well in the chat. Another question I asked in the little survey was, which generative AI tools do you think are potentially useful for your library? And this is a little broader because, again, I didn't focus specifically on the research tools for that presentation. 134 people said ChatGPT. 123 said Elicit, 118 said Perplexity. Research Rabbit had the most with 189. Night Cafe, which is an image generation tool, had 40 responses. 22 people said other, and then Consensus had 103. And here's that article or the post I mentioned earlier from Hervo and Wheatley about the robot test. And I also, before I wanted to go to the live searches, I wanted to mention I'm currently planning with several other librarians across the United States of Gale Virtual Conference. It's similar to this one. We started planning for it before the Library 2.024 one came out. So we're going to have another generative AI conference related to libraries. So this year's theme we decided was Prompt or Perish, Navigating Generative AI in Libraries. It'll be mid-June, 11th, 12th, and 13th from 1 to 4 Eastern Time. So please, please, please consider submitting a proposal if you are so interested. I'd love to keep the conversation going and hear others' perspectives and experiences and insights with generative AI. I think, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about the topic and very curious to see what we can do in our libraries to respond to generative AI. So I see Erin's on here as well. So she posted the link to our conference page, which is great. Erin, if you wouldn't mind also posting a link to the actual proposal form, that would be excellent as well. So I'm going to move forward. And I did want to share my email address here. If you do have questions, you are welcome to contact me after the conference is over, but I'm going to put that in the chat also. It's just breanne.kirsch@briarcliff.edu. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And then what I want to do is share my other screen. Okay, so this is Research Rabbit. I wanted to show you a live version of it in case that's helpful, since I find it helpful to see it actually occurring in real time. So I put in a few articles here about generative AI, and then I can click similar work, and that brings up the 949 articles that are similar to these initial articles that I put in. I can uncheck them if I don't want them to be included in this group of articles. So for example, if I decide I don't like this article, I could uncheck it, and that shrinks it to the 13 selected papers that are checked here. And then from here, I can say similar work, earlier work, or later work. Let's click later work just to see what we get. Okay, quite a few here from 2023, it looks like. And again, these are the little visuals I was showing earlier. So if I click on this, it will bring up that one paper. It gives me the article information. And if it's open access, sometimes they'll actually have the PDF attached within Research Rabbit. If I click on a different one, like a smaller bubble, it will give me the information it has. Now, in this case, it doesn't have a lot of information about this one. Let's try a different one. Here's another one, and this one does have the PDF attached. So that's interesting. And it has a little arrow here showing, I believe that's showing how many people have cited that article. So yeah, you can just explore and see what other articles are and how they're related to each other. And then you can decide to add this new paper to my old list of papers, my old collection of papers, or a folder. It's essentially a folder. And let me just open the chat. Let's see. Okay. So far I have not had to pay for anything for Research Rabbit. That's a good question. I'm not sure if I'm sure there probably is a premium version, or if not right now, probably in the works maybe. But they do have a donate button here in the page, in the corner of the page. So maybe they're just doing it through donations at this point. As far as I know, I don't think there's a premium version at this point, but if somebody else knows, please correct me in the chat. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Dennis said that they boast it'll be free for researchers forever. So I hope that's the case because it's an interesting tool. You don't start with a prompt for this one, you start with a paper. Or you could do a search. I think it let me do a search to start it. Try to go back here, hold on. So if I click new collection, let's call it Generative AI 2. And then if I go to it, it has 0. So I can click add papers, and then you can do a search in here for a title, DOI, PMID, or other keywords. Let's just search for generative AI, see what we get. It asks if I want biomedical and life sciences or all subjects. I'll do all subjects. Okay, so let's say I like this article and this article, so I can add them to my collection. I'll add one more. And then I have my collection here. So from here, I can click similar work, these authors, suggested authors, etc. So then it pops out the other information. So great question, Kelsey. Thank you for asking that. Let's see. And yes, it can be best to have a starter article if you have one already in mind, but you can do that search like I just did. Research Rabbit primarily discovery or synthesis analysis? That's a good question. I'd say it's a mixture of both. That's my interpretation of it, but if somebody else wants to chime in, feel free. Are librarians training students to use these tools? That's the question. And I think moving forward, we need to determine if we should be or maybe we shouldn't be. What are your thoughts on that? Is data about a citation of papers pulled from a specific bibliometrics tool or pulled internally? That's a good question, Elizabeth, and I'm not 100% sure right now. I'm sorry. Again, I think it's pulling from Semantic Scholar and some of those other resources, and it's mainly getting access to the abstracts, is my understanding, and the citations. And then if it's open access, then they may have the PDF attached. Okay. Yes, my understanding is it can work with non-peer-reviewed sources as well as peer-reviewed. Boolean operator. That's a good question. I'm not sure if you can or not. I would think you probably could. We're running low on time, so I don't want to spend too much longer on Research Rabbit, but these are great questions. Thank you, everybody. So let me jump over real quick to Elicit. And again, I did a search here. How should generative AI be used in libraries and in higher education? And it says it's searching more than 125 million academic papers, summarizing the first 4 abstracts. So these are the summary here with the in-text citations that I could click on to go to those articles. And then it has them listed below. So if I just click on one of these, it pulls up the actual article information here. And it does link out to the PDF. In this case, it is available, it looks like. And it gives me an abstract summary, main findings. And in this case, it has it looks like the actual article here, or maybe a summary of the sections of the article. Interesting. Okay, so that's Elicit, and I know I'm running low on time, so I just wanted to show you consensus as well. Again, you can click Study Snapshot. I have 19 AI credits left. So if I wanted to do that, I could use up one of the credits. And again, if I click on one of these, it gives me a question. It's responding to my question and gives me an answer based on what the article talked about. And it gives me the citation information, the abstract, key takeaway, etc. And if possible, it does link out to the full text. All right, so I only have 1 minute left. Is there a final question that I may have missed? Or a final question anyone else might want to put in the chat real quick? So yes, my understanding for the AI credits, Kelly, is that you get 20 per month, and it can be used for the premium options available, like doing the study snapshot. Like you can generate a snapshot and it'll use one of the credits. Oh, you're very welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending today's session, and I look forward to viewing the recordings for some of the other sessions that I haven't been able to attend yet. So please participate in our upcoming Gale conference and submit some proposals if you're able. We want to hear from everyone and different types of libraries as well. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And it is 3:30, so.
Thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording as well.
Great.
That was fantastic.